Welcome in to the Fantasy 4-Pack Football Podcast. I'm your host, Ian Power, joined as always by Frankie Santiago and Matt Vitale. I almost said Matthew Vitale. That would have came out weird. Matthew! And this week we're going to be talking quarterbacks. Some quarterbacks that we like, some quarterbacks that we don't like, and some later round values that we think are the guys you should be targeting, because honestly, who the hell drafts quarterbacks early in 2020? But before we launch into it, Vitale, if you'd like to introduce the beer we're drinking this week.
Yeah, I got to choose this week, so I went through and just kind of picked something that caught my eye. This is called a Matsu Rika. Just got such a pretty can, and I was between this and something called Laser Kitten.
I'm really wishing you picked Laser Kitten. I just because I would love to see what the can looks like.
Oh, pretty can. As I said, it was a tough choice, but this one was a Pilsner, and I felt like I would enjoy a Pilsner a little bit more than an IPA. So, made with jasmine flowers. So like I said, it's also just canned. It's so pretty.
It's very herbal and delicious.
It's really burning my soul that we could be drinking something called Laser Kitten right now, and we're not.
Well, look at that. Should be your pick then for your episode. So
there's also a beer called Laser Cat, but we can get to that another time.
Maybe drink those one after another.
Get the whole Laser family.
All right. Anything else you guys want to get to before we launch into the quarterback discussion?
No, I mean, good choice, Vitale. I applaud you for broadening your beer horizons.
Yeah.
Well, he can't pick Modelo's every week.
Modelo's, ugh.
Or whatever it is you pick.
I'm waiting for that Bud Light episode.
All right. Well, without further ado, let's get into the quarterbacks we're looking at. So we're going to go, like we did for the past two positional episodes, we're going to go tier by tier. Talk about, for the first couple tiers at least for this, talk about guys that we think are misranked as they're currently placed. And this goes off of ECR, so top 58 experts. Obviously, we use Fantasy Pros for that. They have a great tool that allows you to sort. Can't recommend it enough. And we're going to speak on it based on a tier-by-tier basis. For the most part, we didn't have a lot of issues with our first-tier guys. We mostly thought that the guys who were there belonged to be there. One big one that I know you didn't like was Deshaun Watson being ranked 6th.
No, that was actually me.
Oh, I'm sorry, that was you.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, I mean, I've said this before in previous episodes, our early rankings. I thought with maybe some signings, my opinion might change on him.
Sure.
I don't have him quite as low as 13 as I did originally.
Yeah, 13
but
seems
I still think that all of the vacated targets, 150 to DeAndre Hopkins, I don't think that the addition of Brandon Cooks is going to be able to fill that void. So I don't have him throwing the ball as much just in general.
So you don't think that that's priced into his ranking of 6 already? I mean, Deshaun Watson in previous years is typically the third or second or third guy off the board. I mean, you don't think that's already baked into his ranking of 6? That he's going to be taking a step back and not throwing quite as much because he doesn't have DeAndre Hopkins out there anymore?
Well, if he's not throwing the ball as much, you have to look at potential yardage, potential touchdowns. And, I mean, he already has a pretty decently high interception rate. He was, 12 versus 26 touchdowns last year. I mean, I think that, there's no... I won't say there's no replacing DeAndre, but it is a big void to fill with that much volume going to one guy. And granted, that can all be spread around now, but I don't think that he really has that boom guy anymore that's going to give him those big plays, that's going to give him that high touchdown upside as DeAndre did.
Yeah, I mean, I've always been a big fan of Deshaun. He's that... I've never liked the runaround style quarterbacks. I feel like they're good for a redraft year, but I'm
Those are just called running quarterbacks.
Yeah, no, but what I was getting to is because Deshaun is a running style quarterback too. He still had 82 attempts last year, and I think he's more of a complete passer than some of the other guys that I have more faith in. He's more akin to a Russell Wilson than he is a Lamar Jackson. But with him, I am not too worried, just because I think where you'll see his passing numbers dip a bit, I think his rushing numbers will come up a bit to compensate for that, because you'll see more plays break down when no one's open, and he's going to have to run for that first down. He'll pick up more of those 7, 8, 10-yard gains. Might see a couple more touchdowns go his way, so I think it could be a net wash at the end of the year.
I mean, to be fair, no one's Lamar Jackson. That kid had 176 attempts last year for 1,206 yards. Looking at his rushing stats, 82 attempts, 413 yards, 7 touchdowns. I think you're right. I think he might run a little bit more this year. I could see him being up around 500 like you saw Josh Allen and Kyler at last year. The big thing for me is that they may have lost DeAndre Hopkins, and obviously he's just to a certain extent irreplaceable. Like, you can't replicate what he does in the field without getting another receiver of his caliber. But they did go out and get a pass-catching running back in David Johnson. Who knows exactly how much he has left in the tank, but when he looked good last year, it was catching passes.
Yeah.
And then they also did go out and get Brandon Cooks, who, granted, his brain might be oatmeal at this point, but he's still a younger receiver who, when he's on the field, he's able to go out there and make those big plays. I mean, with the exception of last year, he was a perennial 1,000-yard guy. I don't have a lot of issue with Deshaun Watson at 6, as long as people understand that they're not drafting last year's Deshaun Watson. They're going to be drafting a guy who has a little bit lower of a ceiling and potentially a little bit lower of a floor. And I think, like I said, that's baked into his price of 6.
Like I said before, too, I think that, like, I originally had him a lot lower on my list. Looking at the additions of David Johnson and
Yeah,
Brandon
13's
Cooks.
crazy low.
I think, but I mean, there are 2 guys, or probably just 1 guy I would put above him that are below him right now.
I mean, like we were saying in pre-show, I would move him down a slot, but that's only because there's a guy in the next tier that I would bump up high into the first tier of quarterbacks. Let's jump down to that tier 2 though, and talk about someone that I know you're down on. You don't really understand why he's at the top of this tier.
Yeah.
Talk about your hatred for Josh Allen and just Buffalo as a whole.
Hate is a strong word.
Yeah, hate is a bit of a strong word. I think he is just a discount Deshaun Watson. He's a career 58, 59% passing percent, and I feel like you're seeing his ceiling right now is that 6 or 7. So if you're taking him as the 7th quarterback off the board, you're taking him at what I would consider the ceiling. You're not getting a discount where like last year, you could get him in the much later rounds than this. Now people are taking him ahead of Matt Ryan, ahead of Breeze, Brady, Rodgers, Stafford, like all these guys who I think have that higher ceiling, and I see his attempt numbers are going to come up, but I don't see his completion numbers coming up all that much. I think he's going to maybe crack 60, 61%. His yards getting up. I mean, last year was only at 3,000 yards on the season. I can see it getting up to maybe 3,200, but...
So you don't think the addition of Stephon Diggs is going to increase his yardage totals?
I do. Like I said, I do. I mean, he had John Brown, who is a discount Stephon Diggs. I'll admit that, but his accuracy is not going to increase because he has a better receiver out there. I think it's going to be about the same with a couple extra yards tacked on top, and I think his rushing numbers are going to come down. And that's what kept Josh Allen in that 6, that middle of the pack area, was him running for 100 plus times a year, getting that 50, 500 yards, and like I said, last year getting 9 touchdowns. I think that's the crutch that keeps him as a viable quarterback, and I'd rather just go with Matt Ryan, who is due for the boom year. I'd rather go with Breeze. I'd rather go with Brady. It's just all these guys who are just sitting behind him that I think are more accomplished quarterbacks and can give you games that will win you weeks much easier than he can.
Okay. Frankie, do you have any thoughts on him?
I mean, I pretty much... I would, like I said, I'm pretty fine with where Josh Allen is, with the exception of, like you said, Matt Ryan. Drew Brees, I think, is over the hill at this point. Tom Brady's same boat. But I mean, Matt Ryan, I'm really high on. I've always been high on Matt Ryan. I think that he's, like you said, we're due for a boom year. And even last year, so if you look at Matt Ryan, they threw the ball 616 times in Atlanta last year. Like, I think
Sure.
that just the volume that Matt Ryan is capable of putting out, I think is one reason why he should be in that that top tier of quarterbacks.
Yeah, I don't see that changing much for Matt Ryan next year.
So a big reason that I think that you actually could still be buying low on Josh Allen here is if you look at Josh Allen's career, he has improved on a year-over-year basis every year. I mean, 2 years ago, he threw for 2,000 yards, I believe 10 touchdowns, and we we haven't, and he is interception prone, but we also haven't really seen his rushing attempts come down that much. I mean, it dropped from 631 to I believe 531, or his rushing yardage, 510. Sorry. So he did lose some rushing yardage, but the attempts stayed more or less constant. He actually went up a few attempts last year, so just less efficient. We've seen that Buffalo wants to use him as this hybrid quarterback who they want to have him be able to rush the ball and throw the ball. We've also seen him become more protective of the football. Admittedly, it did come at the cost of some of his boom games, but his overall yardage went up. They didn't cut any pieces from the offense, really. There's no important pieces. Like, Frank Gore's gone, but, no one's shedding a tear over that. I don't have a ton of issue with... I could see an argument... I'm not going to push him up, because I think that would be drafting medicine. But I can see an argument for having Allen where he is, because you are getting someone who is still a very young quarterback who is developing on a year-over-year basis and who just got a massive upgrade in offensive weapons. He is Devin Singletary, who's a year older, knows the offense better now. He still has Cole Beasley. He still has John Brown. And now he also has Stephon Diggs. Dawson Knox should look better this year. I'm happy about the direction that offense is going. And his completion percentage also is significantly better than it was in 2018 compared to last year. I think there's less room for him to improve this year. Obviously, he's not going to go up another 1,000 yards and another 10 points or so in completion percentage, but I think you could easily see him tack on a few touchdowns, 500 or so more yards, maybe bring his interceptions down or at least keep him even. And fantasy owners are getting a very productive running quarterback at the end of the day for significantly cheaper than the price you have to pay for a Lamar Jackson or a Kyler Murray or a Dak Prescott or a Russell Wilson, because all those other running guys, or all the elite running guys at least, they're all going in rounds ahead of him.
Yeah. I mean, for me, it's just he already has the turnover prone tag on him. I mean, he's 20. He had 9 interceptions last year, 12 his first season. Granted, that was his rookie season. But then you look at when he's running the ball, he's putting the rock on the ground far too much than comfortable. Granted, he's only lost 4. Like last year, he only lost 4 of those fumbles, but still 14 fumbles. And he kept 10 of them. But if you're in a league where you penalize someone for just putting it and getting a fumble counted against you, that's a point or 2 against you. And 14 times, that might be something that the coaches look at to try and rein in his rushing. And like I said, if they think he's the guy for the future, they might want to protect him and bring his rushing total back down towards 70.
I just can't see them cutting that much off of his total. That would be handicapping what he does best. I mean, at the end of the day, he's never going to be that pure pocket passer. If you're cutting that much off his running, he's not going to be as useful to you as a team. But at the end of the day, like I said, if you don't want to draft Josh Allen there, I mean, honestly, I probably won't be either, because he's going to be going a little bit too high, a little bit too rich for my blood. But Josh Allen is somebody where if he fell a little bit further, I'd be very interested in getting my hands on him this season, because he's someone who I really like the steps they've taken in Buffalo to make him the centerpiece.
Yeah, my last just bit on him is that I think he is honestly, his price is a little bit too much where you're not getting much of a bargain. And if I'm going late round shopping on a quarterback, I want the guy with the highest ceiling that could potentially win me a league, like the Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, a couple of years that Matt Ryan was a cheap quarterback. Those are the guys, if I'm waiting on quarterback, those are the guys I want.
Yeah, because ADP-wise, he is going currently as the 7th quarterback off the board in best ball leagues. Looks like he's going pretty far back in. He's honestly further back than I thought he was going to be. He's going as far back as average draft position right now is 90 in best ball leagues. So, I mean, we're actually talking about someone where he's going right now. People that are being drafted around him: Julian Edelman, Jordan Howard, Brandon Cooks, Rob Gronkowski. Like, that's legitimately far enough back where I could see myself, owning some Josh Allen if he's on the board when my pick comes around there.
Right. Best ball, it might be that way, but at least when we're going on, when I'm looking at ECR and I'm looking at every player where they're going right now, he is still coming off as the 7th. He's coming off around pick 75. They have him ranked as the 71st guy on the list. And right around there, I want almost every single guy in this list. Tyler Boyd, Marquise Baldwin, Hunter Henry, Sony Michel, Julian Edelman. These guys are all guys who can kind of round out the end of your starters, be a solid flex guy, or just a later round guy that could.
You mean Marquise Brown?
Yeah, sorry, Marquise Brown.
Or Marquise Goodwin.
I was like, who's Marquise Baldwin?
Yeah, Marquise. Doug Baldwin, I'll miss you.
I forgot he was a player.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, at the end of the day, I think he's someone who could be a value. It depends on where you can get him. Another guy who I'm really high on, he's someone who I'm targeting as my primary quarterback this year if I can get him, especially because he's going so far back right now. I know you guys are equally bullish on him. We've touched on other videos. Matt Ryan is in line for a great season. I mean, he's always in line for a good season. He's got fantastic weapons around him. It's just the coaching dragging him down. But it's an every other year thing. You know, he's due for a good one because last year was a down year. Julio hasn't gone anywhere. Ridley's taking a step forward where I'm really happy for Ridley this year. I want to own more of him. He's someone who I think has a lot of upside. And he now has a better running back than he's had in a long time because, you know, Devonta Freeman just vanished off the face of the earth. I think that Matt Ryan is someone who could be legitimately a league winner for fantasy owners this year, especially given how far back he's going. I mean, while we're touching on average draft position, his ADP right now in best ball 97. Like that's so far back. It's honestly crazy. He's being drafted just ahead of Tom Brady and Drew Brees, and to me, there's no comparison between the quarterbacks that are being drafted near him and what Matt Ryan. I mean, Matt Ryan's the only guy I think that's being drafted that far back that has legitimate number one upside. I mean, we'll talk about it later on. There's some other guys that we think could be like, you know, dark horse, sneaky league winners, but that's a very low percentile chance that they end up there. Matt Ryan's somebody who you could legitimately draft in 97. What's that? The 8th round, 9th round? And he could end up just smashing for you and carrying you to fantasy nirvana.
Yeah, I mean, he's a guy that some years he goes a little bit too high, and I'm willing to just step back on him. But there's been years, and you can get him in the late rounds. I've seen multiple times where he's gone into 12, 11, you know, those double-digit rounds where you're just kind of throwing darts at the board at guys you like, that have guys that have upside, guys that might be injured for a certain amount of weeks or suspended. Matt Ryan is just, you can't hate a quarterback that's going to get 600 attempts. That offense just churns out points. There's a reason why, you know, Julio Jones has been a perennial, you know, top 5 receiver. Their running backs, I mean, Devonta Freeman destroyed the league that one year, and now they've got Todd Gurley in there to replace him, who I think still has a couple years left on those tires. And, I mean, for the price, I think he's going to start coming up as people realize how low he is. So I'm hoping that this price holds to the start of actual redrafts in August. But for where he's going right now, I'm 100% in.
Well, and one other thing to consider, too, Dan Quinn's coaching for his job.
Also, it's like, okay, so we talk about Ryan having a down year last year. I mean, I imagine whoever was high on Deshaun last year was, I mean, we're talking about how good Deshaun is. Last year, Ryan threw 2 more picks, but he threw for the same amount of touchdowns and almost 1,000 more yards.
It's telling when
he threw for
when his down year is still a very good year.
Like he threw for 70 more completions. I mean, I've been saying these past couple episodes. Yeah, it was a down year for Ryan, but it wasn't really a down year. He was still, I think, a top 5 quarterback.
He finished 10th quarterback in 10th in quarterbacks overall last year, at least for
Yeah, in fantasy
for how PFF has him ranked.
When I'm looking at it right now, they've got him as number 8 for last year. They said the big thing is him is you're just not getting rushing, and that's what helps Josh Allen types, Watson's help them keep above him because they're getting.
He is very one-dimensional.
Yeah, he's out there, he's slinging the rock, but you're getting a guy who's thrown it 600 times, which when you look across the board, even Pat Mahomes, other guys who are just pocket passers. I mean, Dak Prescott was the only guy to even come close last year, and he got up to 3.
And another thing to even think about too is like that's with all the injuries in the offensive line. Like that's with him being pressured. That's like it's not outlandish to say that some of those picks came on pressure plays. I think he's going to be a lot more efficient this year, if not just overall just leaps and bounds better than we saw him last year.
I mean, you look at his yardage. Really, the only thing that's separating him from some of the quarterbacks that were in that top 5, aside from Lamar Jackson, who, I mean, he still had a bunch of passing touchdowns, but the only thing that's separating him from those guys, because he's got the yardage to hang there, it's the fact that he threw for 26 touchdowns and he had 14 interceptions. I mean, if you factor in the fact that he's probably not going to throw for 14 interceptions again, he's going to have some, but 14's high. I think you can factor in for 11, 12. You shave a few points off there. And that he should have more passing touchdowns this year because they're going to have a better offensive line. They're going to have a running game that opponents have to respect. They've got Dan Quinn, who I think sucks as a head coach, but he's still going to be pulling out all the stops to try and keep his job. And you would like to think that translates to fantasy points. And then he does have Calvin Ridley, who's another year older, more mature. Julio Jones obviously hasn't lost a step. He's still just Julio.
Another year removed from that foot injury.
Hayden Hurst, I'm excited to see what he can do in that offense. I think we saw last year with Austin Hooper that tight end can be a big part of that offense, and Hayden Hurst is a second-year guy now. They paid a pretty penny to get him. Like it seems like they're going to be a come out and sling it offense. Matt Ryan isn't someone I want to have as my actual team's actual team's quarterback. He's a choke artist when it matters, but
fantasy wise,
yeah, fantasy I don't care about that. Can he go out there and score points? Can he go out there and score points in garbage time? I think the Falcons are going to be behind a lot.
Yeah,
like they're a team who's going to have to throw often and hopefully from behind. It's going to force him to go out there and just put up stats.
Right. I said it's always a good thing for your offense when you're going from Ito Smith and the damaged remains of Devonta Freeman to Todd Gurley, the guy who was the number 1 running back 2 years in a row. Like that jump, even if you think that Todd Gurley that we saw last year is the real Todd Gurley, which I don't agree with at all, it's an upgrade. It's a clear 100% upgrade. Teams have to contain him, and that's just going to open up more area for him to throw. Less double coverage, less guys over the top to screen Julio Jones for those long balls.
Sure.
It's just all of it's a net positive for this year.
Frank, you want to lead us off about Carson Wentz? You're our Eagles fan here.
Yep.
I mean, Carson Wentz, I would put Rodgers above him. I would probably put Stafford above him. That's right. That's pretty much on par. Like I said, I would probably just swap the tiers, put those 2 guys above him. I mean, for me, I'm always he played 1 full season in his last 3 years.
Something like that, yeah.
Yep. It was for his rookie season, and last year was the only 2 seasons he played a full 16.
It's also not even just an injury concern for him. It's his receivers. They can never seem to stay healthy.
Yeah.
He's throwing to the fan in section 32A.
Oh yeah.
We saw last year when he had Greg Ward as his number 1 receiver for a little bit.
Also being a little bit more bullish on Miles Sanders. I think that they're going to start to get more of a balance in the running game and the passing game.
Sure.
I think they're going to start to go a little bit more towards that because of all the injuries to Wentz, and that he seems to be the guy who has to do it all, which results in injury often.
That's fair.
But just to be the devil's advocate here, because I'm not a huge fan of Wentz, when you look back at last year, once again, as I just said, it's hard to hate a guy that has 600 attempts. He had 607 attempts. He tacked on 200 attempts from his previous 2 seasons. And like I said, clearly they want to throw with him. When he's on the field and he's healthy, that's 600 attempts you're getting out of this kid. 62% completion is not the greatest, but he's shown that he is better at handling himself in the pocket, not turning it over as much. I mean, 14 interceptions his first year, and then 7 since then. So, yeah, when I'm statting him out, I'm just going to put another 7 right there in the interception column and just call it a day. I think the big problem with him is the receivers not staying on the field, him not staying on the field. But I think I'm going to lean on the side of going away from injury. If this kid plays 16 games, I think you can bill him for 7 interceptions, 600 passing attempts. I think it's just the quality of the targets aren't as good. It's where we love Matt Ryan because he's chucking to these, this elite offense. This is just like this is a bargain bin version of Atlanta.
I'm very down on Carson Wentz. I don't stat for injury, neither for him or his receivers. But at this point, you have to. While you're not statting for injury, you're statting them out for a full season. Like what happens if they play 16 games? He's a very, very, very high risk pick for me.
Yeah.
Especially given where he's going. I mean, he's going with these expectations that he's going to be this guy you can count on. He's being drafted in the second tier of quarterbacks, ahead of guys or right with guys like Brady and Breeze, who, say what you will about them, I'm not big fans of them this year, but they do provide more of a degree of safety than him. Mm-hmm. And then there's just so many guys after Carson Wentz that I think offer a lot more safety and a lot more upside. Because there's a lot of moving parts for Carson that all need to go right for him to have a smash season. I mean, I've got him statted out for about 530 attempts this year and 3,750 yards. Like, I don't have him planned out for a great season because so many things have to go right. I'm taking a little bit off the top for him because it just you need a perfect storm of things to happen for Carson Wentz to end up as this guy who's leading you to the fantasy promised land. I like guys that I would take ahead of him that are currently going behind him. I would take Rodgers, Stafford, Baker. I would take Big Ben. I'd take Danny Dimes. I'd take Ryan Tannehill. I'd take Jared Goff. You could sell me on taking Kirk Cousins or Joe Burrow over him. Like, all of these guys behind him who I think are in better positions both ceiling-wise and better positions from just protecting you long-term so you aren't scrambling week 7 to find a new quarterback because you drafted Carson Wentz in the 8th round instead of some of the other guys who have more safety. And then, you pick a backup like Teddy Bridgewater or something, and it's like, there's nothing sexy about him. He's fine, but he's not gonna win you any weeks.
Right. And
like it's for me it's less about what Carson has to offer and more about the people he's being drafted around. I think he is egregiously overrated, where people are remembering how good he was before all the injuries took place. And I remember like that one good season he had, and they're hoping that translates into fantasy points this year. But hope ain't a tactic.
He's not sexy for me to buy, but I'm just hoping maybe he falls down the ranking enough that I'll take him as a cheap guy.
So, with that, let's jump down to our next group of guys here. I touched on it a little bit when I was talking about how much I hate Carson Wentz and how I would drop him down to the bottom of the 3rd tier and potentially into the 4th tier. 3rd tier is a group of guys that I'm very excited to draft this year. I'm not a high quarterback guy. I don't take quarterbacks in the early rounds. I don't think the value is there. I mean, when you're taking guys like Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, sure, they're great. They're going to put up points for you, but the opportunity cost of drafting them is just too high for me. I mean, if you scroll back up the ADP and you look at the best ball ADP right now, I mean, like, guys that are going around Lamar Jackson, Chris Godwin, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, George Kittle, Leonard Fournette, Kenny Golladay. Like, would you rather have Lamar Jackson over any of them?
No, definitely not. I mean, when you look at the fantasy pros, the ECR for redraft leagues, Lamar Jackson's the 24th pick. That's the back of the 2nd round. You can get guys, like I said, just look around here. Odell Beckham, A.J. Brown, for you A.J. Brown lovers. Juju Smith-Schuster, Eckler, Mark Andrews. I think that's a little too high for him, but still, it's like there's all these guys who can be anchors for your team in this time where they're ranking these quarterbacks up here. I'll just wait and I'll get a guy in the later rounds where I have this core of two elite running backs, two elite wide receivers, while you have a quarterback you need to churn in those elite weeks every week, otherwise you're not getting value back. Whereas you can be the guy who took Lamar Jackson last year in the 11th, 10th round, and he's beating doors off your whole league because he has those elite running backs and wide receivers, and he has an elite quarterback. So that's usually my view on it, but I also think it comes back to know your league. And we have a league that's gotten a little sharper as it's gone. We saw no quarterbacks go off the board until the 6th round, which, based on every other ranking, has been not the standard. So you sit there and you keep watching. If your league is bullish on quarterback and they're taking them based on ranking,
take advantage of that.
Take advantage. Let them take them. Let them take them.
So let me ask you guys this. Based on current ADP and current rankings, where would you guys start considering drafting quarterback? Like, what is enough of a discount where you guys be like, all right, you know what, this round, I'll start looking at drafting guys? I know for me, it's the 5th round. In the 5th round, which is currently where Kyler and Dak are going, and Russell, that's the round where I think you're getting a guy that has a ton of upside, and the people that are being drafted around him aren't always solid at that point. So like there are some good people around. Like that's where Marquise Brown is going. That's where Tyler Boyd is going. That's where J.K. Dobbins is going. That's where Terry McLaurin's going. So it very much depends for me who's been taken at that point. If I'm at maybe like the back of the 5th, or if there's been like a big run on players that I want and there's just no one that I think is worth taking at that point, that's for me where I'll start looking at taking a quarterback, because I am high on Kyler and Dak this year. I'm interested to see what you guys think.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. Vitale, the player, and when it comes to our league, I'm a little bit more jaded just because I have been that guy. Like I said, our league sits on quarterbacks, as I was saying. And I've tried to reach for that guy when they fell, who was supposed to be consensus, top 2, top 3 guy, and only last year with Deshaun did it even slightly work out. So I've just kind of a little salt in the wound. I'm just probably gonna hold my ground at least for that league and wait for the last rounds. But if I said just being objective about it, I think I'll wait till the back of the 5th and probably 6th. But like I said, it's just when you look at the value you can get later rounds, that's just how I'm going to go about it.
Well, to be clear, I'm not saying that you have to draft a quarterback here. I'm saying just like what's the earliest you would even consider it?
After 5. So yeah, it would be 6th round because I want 5 positions filled.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat as you guys. Being the perennial guy who takes Pat Mahomes for the past 2 years, it has come back to bite me in the ass. Not even in terms of the volume that he's getting and the points that he's getting, but just I've like that spot at that 2 or 3 where it's 3 last year. That came back to bite me in the ass in more ways than one. So I'm thinking turning over a new leaf this year, fill out my running backs, get a wide receiver, maybe a tight end, and then at 6 I'm looking at like guys like maybe not as good as Russ or Kyler, but whoever else is slightly behind them in that same.
Well, I mean, so in the 6th round, so right now, just in the 6th round, Russell Wilson, based on ADP, is the first pick in the 6th round right now.
I would say even things like depending how my roster looks, I might not look at a quarterback until the last 2-3 rounds. Streaming I've done before. I think it's a legitimate strategy. Also
let me cut you off for a second here, because we're not specifically talking about what you think the best strategy is. I'm more just curious, what is the absolute highest that you would consider drafting a quarterback this year? Like stars align, there's no one else on the board you want, and Dak Prescott or Josh Allen or Russell Wilson is just sitting there in the 5th or 6th round. Do you take them or do you pass on them and just grab the next best positional player and wait and grab a quarterback later? That's what I'm saying.
Assuming I have my top 5 positions filled up, round 6.
Okay. So let's jump into the tier 3 guys, because I wanted to get that out of the way before we talked about these guys, because these are a lot of the guys where, while I would consider taking a quarterback that early, it has to be like the absolute perfect situation for me to do that, because I love this tier 3 of tier 3 of quarterbacks for me. That is the sweet spot. That's where you're getting a huge discount on them. You're getting them in like 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th round sometimes for some of these guys. And they're all legitimately people that you're probably streaming with them. There's probably weeks you don't want to start them, but they're guys that you're going to be able to start most weeks without thinking. And then you just got to play the matchups for those weeks where they're in an absolute trash matchup. Like a big guy that I'm very high on, actually, I would put him in the next tier up, and I think that he's going to get a massive discount right now. Matt Stafford. Really, one of the only matchups I don't like that he's opening the year against Chicago. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, that's a gross matchup week 1. I would probably stream someone else over him that week. But like aside from that, Stafford's a gunslinger. He's got fantastic receivers. I'm high on Kenny Golladay. Marvin Jones always goes out there and just puts up points. He's got some good running backs, whether you're a carry-on guy or a Swift guy. It doesn't really matter. The running backs are going to be there one way or the other unless they all get hurt again. And then I also have Hawkinson pegged as a guy who's going to take a big step forward this year. So like that offense should be an offense that I don't want to own any of the running backs, I'm not going to lie, but like the passing offense part of it, very excited. I would be very happy if I could stack, Kenny Golladay with Matt Stafford and go into the season with that, because he's someone who I think could be a legitimate league winner for you based on where he's going, assuming he plays the entire year.
Yeah, I'm not as in on Matt Stafford, but I do like his price. I think that's the big thing there. At this point, you're grabbing guys who definitely have question marks, but for the price that you're getting them in the back of your drafts, potentially in double-digit rounds, you can't pass that up. Also, as you did say, Patricia is definitely playing for he's going to be coaching for his job this year.
He should be, at least.
Just because of how putrid that team has been. Granted, last year was just injury city for them.
Because, I mean, right now Stafford is a back of the 9th round pick. He's going around guys like Noah Fant, Darrell Henderson, Dallas Goedert, Jamison Crowder.
Yeah, like I said, they're all going around people that are not as sexy of a pick. And then you can get a quarterback. Like I said, for me personally, I like a guy who's a couple ranks down from that. I'd rather go with Big Ben. I'd rather wait and get Big Ben in the double-digit rounds, who only 2 years ago was the number 3 quarterback. And I think that he still has that high upside in him. Maybe not 3 anymore because of the talent of the young elites that we have now. But I could see him coming in 6, 7.
Well, so the thing that Big Ben has going for him is his passing volume. Big Ben's going to throw. He's going to throw a lot. I mean, that defense is still a very good defense, which is something to worry about. That may detract from the passing volume. But we know that Big Ben's going to go out there and throw. James Conner can't stay healthy, and they don't really have anyone behind him that I'm particularly excited about. So I think they're going to be a pass-first offense. James Washington, Juju Smith-Schuster, they're people who should be taking a step forward this year. I mean, their entire receiving core is like under the age of 25. It's crazy.
Yeah.
So it's like with a veteran leader like Big Ben at the helm, I agree with you there. I'm not as high on him as I am on Stafford, but I would be happy to end up with Ben on my team, especially given that he's going after Jared Goff. Like,
yeah,
no one's clamoring at the gates to get Jared Goff on their team.
Honestly, another guy that I think is that's in this tier that I wouldn't mind having on my team. I mean, somebody else that no one's really clamoring at the gates for, Danny Dimes. I think that he's like, I mean, you have to look at all the injuries on that Giants offense last year. They were throwing, I'll say it again, fan in section 32A.
It wasn't quite as bad as that because they did have Sterling Shepard for a lot of the year. They had Darius Slayton for a lot of the year.
Golden Tate came back in after his suspension.
Yeah, Evan Ingram was off and on the field. The big knock for them was they were missing Saquon, which is a massive,
and which is another reason why I think that he's going to take that step forward this year. Again, he threw 460 times last year.
I mean, I'm not a big Danny Dimes guy, but if you are, so the narrative for Danny Dimes is if you like him, you're expecting him to. You're basically making the argument you just made. He had all these injured pieces. He was a rookie. He didn't have Saquon for most of the year. if you're trying to craft an argument for why you want to back Danny Dimes going into the season as your number one quarterback, it's because he's someone who, if everything breaks his way, or even if a lot of things break his way, he could provide a lot of value for you. The big thing for me is I would want to make sure I have a strong streamer behind Danny Dimes, because I don't think Daniel Jones is someone who you can really count on a week in, week out basis. I mean, I have him as my QB 14.
Oh, if I'm getting Danny Dimes, I'm picking up somebody that's going to be able to be streamed behind him. Because he's not going to be that guy who's going to have those like huge boom weeks like those Pat Mahomes or Lamars or the Russes. He's going to just get that consistent volume, especially if all of his weapons stay healthy. And I think that you're going to need somebody that's going to be behind him to fill in those weeks where he plays teams like Baltimore, like Pittsburgh, like Chicago. Because, I mean, I think he's going to struggle against those teams.
One thing I will say, too, as a point in his favor, I don't typically factor in strength of schedule. I used to. I've found over the years that it means almost nothing until you actually get into the season and see how the defenses are actually playing.
Yeah.
Because defense has such a massive turnover on a year-in, year-out basis. But one thing that has remained constant for us, more or less, over the last couple of years is that the NFC East has absolutely putrid defenses. Like, I'm talking terrible. If you can get a guy who has a potentially high-scoring offense in that NFC East, he is going to have a lot of streamable matchups. Even if you are using him as a streamer, I mean, that's 5-6 games a season, depending on if you want to play him only at home or on the road as well, where he gets to go up against just terrible defenses.
Yeah, I mean, Danny Dimes is that guy. I wasn't super interested in him, but he's one of those guys he's a bit of a gamble. You look at him and you gotta hope that he's gonna take that step.
Would you say he's a gambler?
Oh yeah. He's gonna take that that step forward from his rookie year, because usually rookie quarterbacks, they're solid but not amazing. They're usually a streaming option at best.
Yeah, I mean, look at the rookie records. There's a reason that they're all as low as they are, because it's tough to come into this league as a quarterback and immediately make a splash. That's why I'm not very high on Burrow this year.
Right, and I think that when you look at that and you actually look back at his rookie campaign, it wasn't that bad. Like I said, he played 13 games and 24 touchdowns and 12 interceptions. That's a pretty good interception rate for a rookie, coming into a team that had a lot of injuries. And honestly, he does have some better weapons than people give him credit for. Like Golden Tate, a great veteran presence for that team. Slayton and Evan Ingram, Saquon. Like I said, you look around and they're all guys that you would want on your fantasy squad. And I think it's all a recipe that if you're ready to buy in on the Giants, their defense is not great, so they're going to get scored on and going to have to throw. So I'm slowly talking myself into Danny Dimes more than I thought I was, but it's more of just, do you believe that there's a reason why they took him as high as they did when they could, and
I think they took him as high as they did because David Gettleman's an idiot.
Yeah, I think that's the bigger thing, because I think it was still a dumb pick, because I don't think he was going to go that high in the draft. But I mean, you got to put some stock into them taking him as the number 6 overall pick.
Speaking of idiots, because I do want to see how, especially you, Frankie, because I know we joke about you being just various NFC East fans of teams, but are you guys worried about Jason Garrett torching this kid? I mean, we know the clapper is not a recipe for fantasy success. He was the bane of Dak Prescott. It felt like he was the reason that Cowboys team wasn't succeeding at times. I mean, obviously they did well last year, but I think that was more Kellen Moore than it was Jason Garrett. Are you guys worried about him being Danny Dimes' offensive coordinator this year? Do you think he's going to have a negative effect on Daniel Jones?
What do you think about it? Like I said, you have been through the rigors that
none of us have had to deal with Jason Garrett.
We've
personally.
Never had to be a Cowboys fan for that long, so I've just enjoyed the ride of watching this for as many years as it went on.
I don't know if it's going to be particularly detrimental to him. It could. I mean, it was detrimental to us for a while. But I think that maybe what Jason Garrett needed was a change of scenery. Hopefully, because I mean, like, just looking at this guy last year, he seems to have a lot of promise. He seems to know what to do with the football. I mean, 24-14 or 26-12, whatever it was.
And it gets much colder in New York, so Jason Garrett will have to clap much faster to keep his hands warm.
Yeah. I mean, I think, honestly, the bigger part of this is that I like that he's not the head coach. I think that's a good choice. He's a guy with experience, and I don't think he is head coach material in this league anymore. Him being the OC, I'm more worried that Joe Judge is their head coach. Granted, he had 8 seasons with the Patriots, and everyone, for some reason, everyone wants a bit of that Belichick coaching tree, even though they always turn into duds. There's not much that comes off that tree and produces well. And
yeah, it's telling when Bill O'Brien is the best thing. That's like, it's almost like Belichick's style isn't replicatable, and it's just like Belichick is just a singular genius who's good at what he does. He can't teach it though.
Yeah, it's I guess it's something like that, or it's.
I know my Patriots homer is coming through.
It's weird. Yeah. It's almost like there's a banner on the front of the table.
Yeah, and then you look back at him. He spent.
Sure means nothing.
It's not like he spent 8 years at the OC. It's not like he spent 8 years as assistant head coach or something like that. He spent 8 years as the wide receivers coach, and that's a position that's a lot less coaching intensive. It's a lot more just, can you do it? Do you have the physicals to break coverage, to jump over the top of a guy? I don't think you have to teach Odell Beckham how to dive backwards and make a one-handed catch. I don't think his coaches were the reason he made that catch, and why Des Bryant didn't.
Yeah, I mean, generally I'm down on Belichick coaching prospects. I'm actually reasonably excited for Brian Flores. I think there's some good things going in Miami, but I agree with you there. I do think that Joe Judge could be. I think honestly, the entire coaching tree, Joe Judge, Jason Garrett, I think they all could be detrimental to Daniel Jones' success. I'm just he's someone who, just based on who he's going around. I mean, I don't have a ton of reason to grab him. I'd rather have almost everyone else. Actually, yeah, I'd rather have everyone else in that tier. I'd rather have Rodgers, Stafford, Mayfield, Roethlisberger, Tannehill, and Goff. I'd rather have Kirk Cousins. You could sell me on having Jimmy Garoppolo over him.
Yeah, no. Nope. But, I mean, if you guys are set with what your points are for Danny Dimes, the more I look at this tier list, the more I'm flabbergasted, I am appalled, my brain is melting out of my ears when I see Aaron Rodgers as a tier 3 quarterback going.
It's just all the turmoil, man. That Packers team is. It's not what it used to be. Matt LaFleur's, and I have no faith in Matt LaFleur to replicate what they did last year. I mean, we've said it a couple times already. They were the worst playoff team I've seen in a long time.
Yeah, with a 13-3 record.
Yeah, it's like they were the worst good team I've seen in years.
Yeah, it's just something where, for all the years that I've been playing, Rodgers has been that top 3 locked in. Like, he's been Julio Jones, but for the quarterback position. And like I said, I'm not ready to see Julio Jones down as the 12th best wide receiver. It's a weird thing to see for me, and it's just, I feel like I need to be talked off the ledge of being like, why am I not just buying in on Rodgers at that price? Like, why is he not the biggest steal of the draft?
Frankie, do you want to take this, or do you want me to run away with it?
Run away with it. I mean, like I said, that's where I have Rodgers going about.
So I agree with you there, actually. I'm probably not going to take Rodgers because I talked myself out of Rodgers years ago. I've been down, as you guys know, I've been down on Rodgers for years. I've been the guy on Hampton Beach with the sandwich board, ringing the bell. The end is nigh. So I think that what we're seeing is about what should be happening. But I do still understand where you're coming from, where it's like, if you are a Rodgers believer, if you think that the Packers are taking a step in the right direction this year and that everything's going to get back to, situation normal over there, that Devontae Adams is going to go back to being a top fantasy wide receiver, that Lazard is going to take a massive step forward this year, that Marquez Valdez-Scantling and whoever else, the Equanimeous St. Brown and all, and the collection of guys they have are going to provide enough of a fantasy floor for Rodgers that he's going to have targets to throw to, and that Aaron Jones is going to keep being Aaron Jones. Yeah, there's a lot to like there. Rodgers provides a lot of upside. I think Rodgers is someone, though, who has a very large range of outcomes. And that's why I'm avoiding him. Rodgers could. I mean, he's Aaron Rodgers. He's one of the best quarterbacks we've seen in our lifetimes. There's no denying that. He is still one of the elite guys in the league. But the range of outcomes for him is just so large, and it feels like Rodgers doesn't believe Rodgers has it anymore, where you don't see him making those huge throws down the field like he used to Jordy Nelson, where he just hucks it, 45 yards on a dime for this massive touchdown. You don't see him pushing defenses like that anymore. You see him taking what he's given and making good plays, admittedly, when he has it available to him, but when he doesn't have it available to him, he just throws it away. And if you're projecting Rodgers to get back to what he was, then you have to be projecting this offense to be a high-flying, fast-scoring offense. And for me, that's just, once again, just based on the guys he's going around, a risk I'm not willing to take for my fantasy team, because if you're taking Rodgers, then you're not getting Stafford or Baker or Tom Brady or Ben Roethlisberger. You're passing on those guys to get Rodgers. So you are losing a significant investment in your team there to get him on your team, and it's just it doesn't sit well with me. I can't personally pull the trigger on that.
Right. I think it's more of, I think the big question for me is going to be, where does his completion percentage fall at the end of the year? Because I think that's the biggest thing I'm struggling with where to rank him when I'm statting him out. Because you look at last year, he still had 569 attempts, and that's a solid amount of attempts. He still broke 4,000 yards.
569 is great. I will never complain about that.
Right. Still had over 4,000 yards, 26 touchdowns, and only 4 interceptions. I think that's one of the big things he's going to give you is he doesn't turn the ball over that much, and he still has enough of his legs that he's going to run. He had 46 attempts last year for 183. He said, I'm going to pull that down. I think he'll get a couple hundred yards. Maybe he'll run one in, but it's, for me, is the 62% completion percentage. Do you think that's good? I don't see that going down. I don't think we're ever going to live in a world where Rodgers is a 58% completion percentage quarterback. I think it's going to climb back up at least to 65.
So you are speaking to my point there, though, where kind of what I was saying, where it's like you see that with the completion percentage and the interceptions. He has that low interception rate because he doesn't try and force the ball anymore. He doesn't try to make the sexy play. He just takes what's given to him, and if he doesn't have it, he throws it away. So you see, I do think you're seeing the floor for his completion percentage, but to have that go back up, you have to have Rodgers try and make those big plays again. So you are going to get, and obviously if he goes back to the Rodgers he was, he's going to have a few more picks, but you get a much higher return on investment, basically based on his yards and his touchdowns are going to go with that. That makes a few additional picks worth it. I just don't think that's going to happen. I think you're going to see a very similar completion rate and a very similar interception rate, because he's just going to keep protecting his football. He's a stat whore. That's what he is. He wants to look good on the box score at the end of the day. He doesn't really care how many yards he gets or how many touchdowns he gets, as long as he keeps the numbers that he already has good, because it feels like he's just given up on the Packers, honestly.
I get you.
Last guy in this tier that I did want to just briefly touch on. I know you guys don't like this guy as much as I do, but I think that it's important that we touch on him. Baker Mayfield, he's had a lot of things go right for him this offseason. He's gotten new weapons. He's gotten new offensive linemen. And he was the hotness last year.
I wouldn't exactly call him the hotness.
Everyone was very high on him last year.
That whole team was the hotness. There was, like I said, there was a couple of analysts who were calling for them to be the sleeper bust, like basically that trap card of a whole team.
Which it felt like they were.
And like I said, I felt it as well. And I think with him, it goes back to what I said with Daniel Jones. I think he's a better version of Daniel Jones, but you're still, when you look at him, what is he? Is he gonna return to the quality of targets and performance that he had in his rookie year, or have we seen exactly what Baker is through 2 seasons, and it's just a average quarterback who turns the ball over too much?
So originally I was not high on Baker. Looking at the additions he's had in this offseason, a la Austin Hooper. And also now just looking at the target share that, his two main weapons, Landry and Beckham, have had. 138 and 133 respectively. I think that he benefits from, he doesn't just have that one guy who's got that huge target share like DeAndre Hopkins in Houston. He has two guys that are capable of carrying that load.
Well, and don't discount Austin Hooper either. Austin Hooper was a target hog
last year. Showed that he has those two guys that can carry that load, and also there's no favoritism there. It's like both guys are getting the ball roughly the same amount, and now he has another weapon to add to that. Obviously, it's going to eat into those two, with the next highest person being Nick Chubb with 49 targets.
Well, so you have to figure that that's going to go down because tight end cannibalizes running back, and also Nick Chubb's targets went down after Kareem Hunt came back. I think the biggest thing for me too is that he should have a healthy Odell Beckham this year. Odell Beckham played with a hernia all last year.
Yeah,
I never had a hernia, but I hear they're quite painful.
Yeah. I have also heard that.
Like I said, for me, I'm still up in the air with how I feel about Cleveland as a whole. But at the end of the day, it's kind of one of those things where I can see it going right. I can also see it going wrong. Just like last year, I said it's a powder keg of emotions. That team, if they start off hot, they'll stay hot.
So on top of Odell Beckham, and he's someone who I love how cheap he's going. I think everyone's sleeping on him way too much for a guy as talented as he is.
Yeah, way too.
But the other reason that I'm higher on the Browns this year and on Baker Mayfield as a result than I was last year. Last year I went into the year being high on Baker, and then I looked at it more, and I really couldn't get behind that insurance salesman that they had as a head coach driving the team.
Yeah.
Yeah, Freddie Kitchens is useless.
Yeah,
I've seen at times he was ordering from a menu, not calling plays. I think that while Kevin Stefanski doesn't have the resume of a lot of the other head coaches, he was a very successful offensive coordinator for the Vikings for the short time he was with them. And he is more of an offensive mind. And almost anyone is, but he's more of an offensive mind than Freddie Kitchens is. When you combine Kevin Stefanski with the pieces they got and the better offensive line, part of the reason that Baker was so bad last year. You watch his film, he's running for his life constantly. He had 5 turnstiles as his offensive lineman last year. Getting Jack Conklin is going to anchor that line, or at least it should.
Yeah.
I think that we haven't actually seen what Baker can do because we haven't seen him be able to just sit back there and throw, which is a luxury that a lot of quarterbacks that we like in the top 5 are, with the exception of Kyler, that are they're provided that. If you give Baker time with the weapons he has and a good head coach, he should be able to put up numbers. I know I've said a couple, but he's another person he's a higher risk guy for me, but he's another person who I think, if the stars align, he could end up being this great pick for you that can legitimately win you weeks because he has Odell Beckham and Jarvis Landry and Austin Hooper and Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt. That's an all-star team for your offense.
Yeah. It's the same reason. Freddie Kitchens' performance last year is what drives my worry for the Giants and having any of their fantasy players. Granted, Kitchens was what I would consider the pinnacle of that. The running back coach going to head coach. Running back is the even more position where it's your athletics and can you do it?
Yeah, I wasn't aware there was anything to coach at running back.
Yeah, it's they said there definitely
obviously
are
an oversimplification. But.
Yeah, of course. There's definitely some running backs that have a more cerebral approach to it, i.e. Le'Veon Bell with his patient waiting for the pocket to develop. And you have guys who are just bulldozers like your Derrick Henrys. Who doesn't matter. As long as there's a hole for him to run through, he's going to bulldoze defenders until he gets...
Even if there's not a hole. Someone's supposed to make a hole.
Yeah. We've seen guys like, Beast Mode. He, pushing people to the side.
Like the Beast Quake? I still get goosebumps watching that run.
I still don't know if I want him to come back or not. But part of me does, part of me doesn't. But either way, that man... I'm getting off topic. But either way, coming back to Cleveland, I still believe they are a powder keg. and it could be good, it could be bad. I think if Baker gets off to a hot start, if OBJ and Baker come out and they're just clicking on all cylinders, and you see OBJ come out with 100+ yards, maybe a touchdown or two, that team as a whole is just going to ride that hype train. They're going to be like the Panthers the year they went 15-1. I think that's exactly the type of team that they built, which I, as a fan, I don't like. I wouldn't want that to be my team. Because I'd rather have more consistency, a team that can take a loss and grow from it. But for fantasy, if they get off to a hot start, you're just going to churn in fantasy points in.
And that's why I like them. It's at the end of the day, Baker is a higher risk pick, but he's someone who, if I can't get Stafford or Big Ben, I'm probably looking at Baker. Like he's the next guy off the board for me if I miss out on those two guys that I want. So last thing I want to touch on today, I want to hear you guys' thoughts on this as well. It seems like every year there's a guy who goes basically undrafted or at the very back end of your drafts. I mean, last year it was Lamar Jackson. If there is one this year, and I don't think there is one is a perfectly fine answer. If there is one this year, who are you guys picking as your, dart throw to win the league, like Lamar Jackson was for so many owners last year? If you're taking someone with Mr. Irrelevant, your last overall pick.
I'm actually interested to hear what you have on this one, Frankie. Just because I've talked to Ian a bit, and we seem to have a kind of consensus with this one, but I'm wondering if you're on the side of more of a no, there isn't, because I'm between that and there's a dark horse.
I'm kind of on the side of no, there isn't. I think that I won't say. Let me phrase it better. It's not that I don't think there is a no, there isn't, because anybody can just turn it up and be that guy.
So you can say if you think that if you're putting like the majority of your chips in no, there isn't, then it's fine to say no, there isn't.
Yeah, there's years before where there was guys who popped and got up to they climbed out of the dregs of the 20s all the way up into being a top 5, top 6 guy, but they didn't break the league for you.
I think that we are now seeing all those guys that are possible of doing that.
Hold on once, because I would actually. I'm not saying that they'd finish number 1, but I'm saying like who is the guy in this range that would finish as a top 5 or top 7 quarterback? Because if you're drafting a guy this far back who's finishing like that, then assuming you drafted well, you drafted deep at those other positions. So you're getting a massive value with someone like that. So if you're projecting a guy in this range to finish top 7, who is it and why? And if there isn't someone who you think has the ability to finish top 7, then it doesn't have to be like ironclad projection. But if you think there's no one here who can finish top 7, then just state that.
Yeah, I'm like I said, I think that we've pretty much seen all those guys that are going to have that huge boom, like a lot of the Pat Mahomes and the Lamar Jacksons. I don't think there's really anybody that I see in this range that can replicate that kind of ceiling.
Okay. Yeah. Tal, I'll give you the floor first, and then I'll wrap it up.
Yeah, for me, me and Ian have kind of had the consensus that it's going to be Drew Lock. I think he's in a great offensive system. Cortland Sutton has taken a great step forward. Noah Fant, I think, is going to be one of the next top tight ends in the league. Granted, I don't like the running back situation because it's a bit of a three-headed monster, but you can't hate the talent of Melvin Gordon, Phillip Lindsay, and the occasional Royce the Choice Freeman.
I think Rolls-Royce honestly is going to be. I wouldn't be surprised if he traded before the season.
Wouldn't be surprised too, but if they go into the season with all three of those guys, I think that's just a massive amount of depth that team will have. So if they can absorb some injury at the position. Denver's always been more of the high-flying style. And I think this kid came out and he showed only 5 games. 1,000 yards, 7 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. He took care of the ball and showed a little bit on the ground. 4 yards of carry. I just think there's a lot to like with his tape from last year that I'm willing to take a 13th round, 14th round dart throw at this kid, even if I have an elite quarterback. Because maybe if I do get a, Kyler Murray or Russell Wilson, if I get this kid late, I can then flip early, trade away the sexy name of Russell Wilson to somebody, and maybe package them together with something else to shore up a position I'm a little short at. But if I had to pick one, it's Drew Lock. Like, I've wanted to be on the Sam Darnold train for a while, but Adam Gase is just he is a void for fantasy success.
Yeah, he's a black hole.
Yeah.
So I agree. I think Drew Lock is the guy that if you're going to pick one, it's him. But it's not fun if we all say Drew Lock's the guy and move forward. So I'm going to talk about the guy right below Drew Lock, who I think is arguably almost as good of a pick for your like fantasy dart throw, especially because we've seen him do it already in limited sample size, and that's Gardner Minshew II. There's a lot of things to like in Jacksonville if you're looking for, sort of that fantasy hype train. One, I mean, Gardner Minshew is the 24th ranked quarterback, so he's going very far back. On top of that, DJ Chark looked excellent last year. He looked like a legitimate guy you can sort of hang your hat on as a fantasy wide receiver. Leonard Fournette had a surprising amount of value. I think that we could easily see another good season out of Leonard Fournette. And Leonard Fournette had terrible touchdown rates last year. Like, he's someone who we kept expecting to have positive touchdown regression, and it never came. And then, he's got a great running back. He's got a great wide receiver. Doug Marrone is coaching. I mean, he was someone who was constantly brought up last year as like, when are they going to fire Doug Marrone? Well, they haven't yet. Doug Marrone is literally coaching for his job. There's no one else in Jacksonville to even try and take. They got rid of Nick Foles. Like, they are riding Gardner Minshew through this season because they want to see if he can be the guy. And if he isn't, they're just going to draft a new one. Yeah. But like, they traded Nick Foles to Chicago, so he's out.
Yeah.
Gardner is the guy this season. So at a minimum, you're barring injury, you're getting 16 games out of him. And they're going to force him to throw and look and see if they can get a good look at him as, Gardner Minshew, the starting quarterback, not Gardner Minshew, this guy who's just sitting on our bench. His confidence is there. Like, no one can doubt that. And that's a huge part of just you got to be able to forget your mistakes. The kid's confident. He's got good weapons. He's got a head coach who doesn't want to lose his job. Tom Coughlin was great for the Giants for a long time. He's still in their front office. Yeah, I trust he's going to be, sort of the behind-the-scenes coach a little bit, as much as he can. I mean, he had to deal with the idiot that is Eli Manning for years. I think there's a strong case to be made that Gardner Minshew could be someone who is going to be a dark horse league winner for you, if you can get your hands on him late with the 14th or 15th round pick, and you're just throwing a dart. Because the beautiful thing about him too is if he doesn't work out, you cut him. He's a 14th or 15th round pick.
Yeah, and honestly, looking into it, like I said, strength of schedule is not usually a huge thing to look at, but he does have a juicy first half of his schedule up to week 6 before the bye.
Point.
Yeah, I would ride him 6 weeks. You can stream him in between other guys, and then just cut him at the bye, because after that it gets pretty gross. But you gotta love that he starts Indy, Tennessee, Miami, Cincinnati, Houston, and Detroit. Those are all great matchups for him, and I think he can show out. I doubt you're gonna be able to trade him, so honestly, I might cut him, let somebody else pick him up.
I'd probably keep him on your bench just in case.
Yeah, he could.
Maybe you don't start him right after the bye, but you at least keep him to see what he does.
Right. But
unless he's terrible at that point.
Yeah, I think that's the other benefit of an early schedule that's on the juicy side. If he can't produce in the good games, don't hold him.
You just shut him.
Yeah, you cut him before at the bye week and just let him run through the slog that is the back half.
Well, so I would actually, because that's something early game or early season waiver wire is some of the most important waiver wire that you can have in the season. And that's one of the reasons that Gardner Minshew is such a beautiful pick, is you're going to see exactly what you have week 1 and 2. If he looks terrible, you just shed him and grab one of the hot names off the waiver wire. Like, he's someone who you don't have to wait a long time to see if he's going to turn out and give you good fantasy numbers. He either is or isn't, and if he isn't, you drop him immediately, and you grab someone in the first couple weeks and toss them on your bench instead, and then you get, the Terry McLaurin or the Marquise Brown, those players who were the hot commodities in the first couple weeks last year. That's one of the advantages of him as your dart throw is you learn very quickly if he is going to be that successful dart thrower or not.
Yeah.
All right, well, that's going to do it for our quarterback list. Let's do a quick beer check to see who's in the lead.
I am at 1.
I am at 1 1/3.
I'm about right here.
I'll give you this one then. I got last week. We're probably at about the same, so we'll call it a tie.
Sure, we'll call it I won. All right. So I was looking through it and I realized I was in a good position to take this one. I really didn't have much to talk about. Like I said last week, I thought you said it exactly that getting out there and showing some support for these protests is the big thing. But you said it eloquently, so I won't try and upstage or retread what you've already talked about. I think it is important, but I think the big thing I just want to share is more keeping it back to fantasy. Know your league, know your league, know your league. It's something that they say in passing in most podcasts that I've seen, but I think it's something you need to hammer home. You can be, the fantasy analyst can be telling you, sit on quarterback, but if your whole league's sitting on quarterback, you have to try and mix it up some other way to try and take, get the edge on your opponents. A great example is what I learned. I was all about going for the later round picks and trying to see if I could those guys in the first few rounds that might get missed, and I could take them at a cheaper cost. I found out my league had gotten a little bit sharper, so my strategy now is to try and get as high in the first round as I possibly can to get those can't-miss guys in that first round, your Christian McCaffrey, Saquon Barkley's, and whatnot, because it doesn't take a lot of research to get those guys. But then after that, when people have to look at, do I take Mike Evans this year, or do I take Chris Godwin? I don't really know Chris Godwin as well. I'm going to take Mike Evans. Or do I take, maybe I'll take Kerryon Johnson. Whoops, I forgot that he had, he has DeAndre Swift. That's where the picks get harder. So I want to advocate this year that people try and get that top pick. I know it's harder. Maybe you trade up and get there so you can try and take advantage of those turnaround picks where people have to do a little more research. You might see them taking bonehead picks like Mikel LeSure in the second round. But no, that's like you said. That's all I really had was kudos for last week and know your league.
All right, everyone. Well, we'll see you next Monday where we're going to be talking the wild world of tight ends. It's going to be a little more contentious than quarterback, as I don't know about you guys, but after my top 3, my list gets wacky fast. Yeah. So I'm pretty excited to talk tight ends. That's all I got for this week, though. You guys got anything else?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, next week is tight ends is, if you've never seen the movie Snowpiercer, that's basically like in the front of the train, it is glitz, glam, happy faces, and everyone. In the back of it, it is just anarchy and Mad Max.
Oh, yeah.
We will be talking about all 3 elite tight ends and then the rest of them.
All right. See you guys next week. I missed the camera, so you can just cut that part.
I will not.